Hey there and welcome to today's Piano TV video. I'm Allysia, your host, and we're going to be continuing along the train that we've started, which is talking about problems that I find adults commonly face when they're practicing piano. Sort of an updated version on this idea, which I created videos for many years ago, because I've been teaching so many adults in my, probably like 200 plus adults, I think maybe even more, in my online classes, where I'm hearing them play their music every single week. They're sending me their recordings because I'm giving them feedback. So I've had kind of 3 years of exploring these issues, I would say, that people tend to have. So there's already 3 videos on this topic. Definitely check them out if you're interested in catching the whole series. Just a quick note before we start. In the month of August, I've got a webinar series that's totally free that I'd encourage you to join if you're interested in music theory at various levels. So check that below. You can sign up. Again, totally free to access these. And number 2, I have some piano classes that are opening. And most of these piano classes that are opening in August go for 2 semesters. So they're from September to December, and then they're from January to April. And so they're long-term classes, they're group classes where you get to learn along with other people. You get to, as I mentioned, submit your recordings and receive feedback on them, and have a course as the main structure holding everything together at various levels. So most of these classes that are opening in August are not going to open again for another year. So if you are interested and taking some piano lessons in group format, having that structure, that kind of step-by-step instruction, definitely check it out. It's going to be linked below. www.pianotv.net/ptv school is going to be your way in. But anyways, let's talk about this week's topic at hand. A big problem that I find a lot of adult students face when they're playing piano or learning it, and that is perfectionism. So it's interesting because last week we were talking about the sort of wishy-washy approach to rhythm that people sometimes take, like good enough is good enough. But then I also see, maybe just as often, even more, the sort of intense perfectionism. So what this looks like is, first of all, a reluctance to share their music unless it's perfect. So the way that my classes are built are that we have, everyone's given a lesson. They're given the video materials and everything like that. Everyone works on said lesson. And then we meet back a week later to share recordings of said lesson. So the people going through the class are sending the recordings of the lesson that they've been working on. And some people literally will not share recordings because it's not good enough to this high perfection standard. But that kind of defeats the point of learning piano from a piano teacher if you're wanting to get feedback. Imagine going to your piano teacher's studio and showing up your weekly lesson and saying, I can't play it for you, it's not perfect. That's like a crazy concept, right? Because there's so much that can be learned and worked on from imperfect recordings, even if it makes you cringe to listen to, even if it's a little bit embarrassing to share. That's what a piano teacher's job is to do, is to help you with your practice strategies, and maybe there's like a little rhythm thing here you never noticed, or a little dynamic thing there that could be better, or whatever it is. So it's better to share a work in progress than to not share anything at all, because you are afraid of the quality of the piece, and you're afraid that the quality doesn't reflect what you're capable of. That's true of everyone. I mean, my pieces in progress do not reflect what I'm capable of at like full performance like top tier level, and that's totally fine. That's, again, part of the learning process. Another way that I see this perfectionism manifest is that people get stuck on kind of the last 10% of learning a piece for weeks at a time. Now, when I teach classes, we do a lot of music. So if we're doing 26 weeks of lessons, that's probably 20, 21, 22 pieces of music, original pieces of music that we're going to be learning in about 8 months. So it's a lot of music. It changes a little bit. So if you're at a higher level, it's going to be more like, 12, 13, 14 ish, 15 pieces in that same span of time. But anyway, it's still a lot of music regardless. So what a lot of people do is they go in with this approach that they have to become excellently good at every single piece that I assign. Like, if there's a little flaw, it still needs to be worked on. If it's not quite up to speed, it still needs to be worked on. So they do like 90% of the labor of the piece. They get it pretty good. Maybe there's a couple mistakes. Maybe the dynamics aren't perfect. Maybe it's not up to speed. But it's like, a lot of work has gone into this point. It's like 90% there. But then they want to keep working on it for weeks just to try to get that last 10%. Now, I'm not saying that's never a good idea. Perfecting pieces can be extremely rewarding, but you don't need to perfect every single piece you learn, because that'll drive you crazy, and it's going to make you so that you're stuck on pieces and that you end up basically just, I don't know, in the same amount of time work on like half the amount of pieces or less, which gives you less exposure to new music, which gives you less practice with certain concepts, certain counting, and your sight reading abilities will just sort of deteriorate if you linger on every single piece. Linger on a few of them, perfect a few of them, because again, it's really fun to be able to perform pieces for people and show off your like 100% perfectly learned piece, but you don't need to do it with everything. And I noticed that a lot of my adult students kind of kick themselves if they don't get that perfection with literally every single piece. It is okay to learn a piece some of the way and say like, that's it, I'm putting it away, it's good, let's move on. That's really good for your piano development, to be able to do that. And there's this, I think, idea that goes along with that, that unless you learn to play it perfectly, you're not actually learning. Which is crazy to me, because again, you can get 90% of the way with a piece. You've learned 90% of what there is to learn in that piece. You've done all the reading. You've gotten fluent with some finger patterns. You've done details like dynamics or accents or staccatos or whatever. You're learning a new style or a new context or a new, just a new set of notes, basically. You're doing so much work to get to that kind of even 80% level, even 70%. That's still a huge amount of work that represents that journey. Even if it's not perfect. Again, the amount of learning that happens in that perfection stage is very, very slim. What you're really doing is a lot of repetition, muscle memory stuff so that you can perform for people. That's not necessarily the same thing as learning, though. You're learning so much pre-perfection that even if most of your pieces aren't perfected, you can count on the fact that you're still learning a ton, and that's, again, part of the process. Finally, I think really the remedy for this is to, what I've already been saying, so treat pieces, generally speaking, more like study projects as opposed to recital pieces. So a study project is something that you're just sort of working on to learn something from it, but it doesn't need to be fancy. And a recital piece is something that does need to be fancy, because you're showing it off to people. Maybe you want to send a recording to friends or family, or you want to actually get up on a piano in front of people and play. That's one thing, but again, not every single piece that you practice needs to be a recital piece. So if you keep in mind as you're learning most of your pieces that this is for study, this is to build my skill in one or two particular areas. It's to help me get better at sight reading, help me get better at counting, help me get better at playing staccato, or whatever it is. You're keeping that in mind. It's a study. It's an exercise. It's like working in a workbook. And, you know, maybe you're not going to get 100% on that assignment, but that's not the point, because you're still just applying your skills and building your skills all the same. Such that when you find a piece you really like and you want to get perfect at it and you want to make it your recital piece, you're going to have enough mental bandwidth to do that, because you haven't been just absolutely grinding through every piece, trying to get to that perfect level all the way along your journey. Anyway, just something to think about, something I see a lot. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed today's video and the previous ones in the series. I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.